Okay, so we're talking EDA. EDA is where you learn all about your data. You can't just model your clean data and expect to understand things from the model. You understand things by exploring the data itself, right? Number one reason to explore, I'll repeat that. Actually, I'm going to ask y'all, what is the number one reason to explore? One more time.
Better understand the data, like to understand what your story is.
To understand what your story is and to understand what your target, what's driving the target variable. Yeah, yeah. Our general recipe, folks, is kind of a three-step process. First, start looking at your univariate statistics, run descriptive stats, frequency counts, histograms. Univariate means single value. So you're calling .value counts on a single column. You're calling .hist to make a histogram of a single column. You're doing .isNA.sum to sum up the number of nulls in that one column to get to know it more. And we'll also investigate the data types here, because in exploring, you may discover that you missed something in the data prep. Once we're done getting to know, at the very least, the target variable as a univariate, let's start looking into the bivariate stats. Bivariate means two. So plot the interactions between your variables of interest and your target. Document your takeaways. Always write things down. Document your takeaways in the Jupyter notebook. Write them down in your notebook for later so you can write them down in your documentation, like a slide. For numeric to numeric variables, what I like to do a lot of the time is use a scatter plot. A scatter plot gives you a data point for each pair. Or if there's a reason to use a line plot, then use a line plot. And for numeric to categorical variables, I've got a link here to the Seaborn documentation on a bunch of the cat plot functions. And we'll also explore independent variables using visualizations and hypothesis tests to measure for independence, or if there's a relationship between X and Y, where X is some feature, Y is your target. And then we will talk about multivariate stats, and that's asking questions of two or more variables. Now, what's going on when we ask additional questions of the data? Here's an example. How do subgroups compare with each other? Like the subgroups of is senior citizen or has partner or has dependents, right? Compare that to the overall population or to other subgroups. Answer those questions using visuals or hypothesis testing. That being said, if you have more than two variables, the stats get a little zany for multivariate statistics. But what we can do is if you have two groups or a subgroup in a population, you can peel those apart and run tests on two variables at the same time there. I'm a big fan of Seaborn because we have visuals on Seaborn where we can add a category as a hue or a column argument. And if you use both hue and column and X and Y, you've got a four-dimensional chart that's reasonably easy to read. We can jam more dimensions on there with like X's and O's and the size, but that gets tough. That gets tough to discern. It is okay to use pair plot for your numeric data. Pair plot on anything other than numeric data. Like if you use pair plot on your Boolean values, like your zeros and ones, you're just gonna get a lot of noise, right? But pair plot is nice if you have lots of continuous data. So my hint on pair plot is it's not gonna be the silver bullet for like telco, because telco just has months, total charges, monthly charges, right? Not a lot to pair plot there. But pair plot's a nice way to cast a broad net if you do have a lot of numeric variables. And then once you isolate based off of that pair plot what variable pair you're interested in, then you can zoom in with a scatter plot, a line plot, a cat plot, etc. And I've got more more links to the documentation on multivariate options in Seaborn. Okay, so let's talk about what statistical tests to use here, and then we'll get into some code. So what stats tests to use? If your visuals aren't crystal clear, you do need to do some hypothesis testing, right? If you're comparing numeric to numeric, a couple of things you can do. You can test for linear correlation with Pearson's R. Pearson's is a straight line correlation, or you could use Spearman's R for nonlinear relationships. So like any kind of curvilinear relationship, right? Or a polynomial. For numeric to categorical, if we're comparing two populations, we'll use a two sample t-test. Or if we are comparing one subgroup to the rest of the population, that's a one sample t-test. If you have multiple groups, more than two groups, ANOVA is the right tool there. And if your data doesn't meet the assumptions of a t-test, no, it doesn't need to perfectly match the assumptions of a t-test. But if your data is like wildly doesn't have anywhere close to the same variance as isn't normally distributed, try out the Mann-Whitney U-test. And I've got that linked in the SciPy stats module. You use the p-value in the same way. You just grab the same, different test, different statistic. Instead of t, it's u. Oh my God, but all we care about is the p-value, okay? And then if we're working with categorical to categorical, chi-squared. It's a great one. Here are your standing orders. Your standing orders for data exploration. Document your initial hypotheses, your initial questions, your initial assumptions, write them down. You will forget stuff because you're human, write them down. Document your takeaways. Once you make a visualization, figure out what the takeaway is. If the takeaway is there's nothing interesting between X and Y, write it down. If there's a straight line linear relationship, write that down. If there's kind of a curved relationship, write that down. Document your answer to each one of the questions. When you run your stats test, document your null hypothesis, document your alternative hypothesis. The code is not going to do that for you, right? Any fool can just run the code, but it takes a thinking, careful, deliberate human being to come to conclusions on this stuff. I'm so glad that y'all are thinking, deliberate, curious human beings. That's what makes the magic happen in my perspective. The magic isn't the calculus or the linear algebra. The magic is human ingenuity, right? So document your takeaways, even if you find that there's no relationship, that's a takeaway, right? Thomas Edison found 1,000 ways to not make a light bulb. And how much of that is kind of an urban myth or not, I don't know. But if you establish that there's no relationship, write that down. If you have inconclusive results, even if you're not able to say, well, there might be a relationship or there is a relationship in some conditions, write it down and then document your action plan. Really, that's the thing with Explore. And that's one of the big reasons why we use so many notebooks rather than just writing comments in the code, because you can drop right into text and write what you found. The code produces an image, and then underneath the image, you write text to explain how to interpret that. Cool. This is our recipe. Standing orders is document everything. Document your initial hunches, hypotheses, document your results, document what the visuals show. If you just barf out a whole bunch of visuals onto a notebook, but you don't explain what the visuals are showing, maybe your audience will give you attention, maybe. Probably not. Tell your audience what you want them to see because you found it, right? Questions on standing orders, questions on stats tests, questions on our general recipe, questions on the process of exploratory data analysis, why, where, and what. Yeah, Kayla, go ahead.
So I'm wondering, I understand with these data sets, we have like a context, so we understand we can like make a hypothesis on churn data and whatnot. Yeah. But is there any like situation or process? I'm just thinking if we were to receive a data set and we just really didn't have a good conceptual understanding because it wasn't our specialized area, yeah. How we look through the features to know which one we're going to choose for the target variable, and then how you think through that process.
Yeah, that's really an interesting question, Kayla. So the question of what if there's not a data dictionary, or what if we can't figure out what the columns mean? How do you even proceed forward? I'll share that a couple of perspectives. I've seen some Kaggle competitions and some other data science competitions, ML competitions, where they don't actually explain what the variables are. They just give you X, Y, and Z and say predict Z as a function of X and Y, or A, B, and C. It's usually many more variables than that. In those cases, that might be because that's like personally identifiable information in some way, and it needed to be anonymized, or if there's like I've seen, I haven't done the kind of work like this, but there's an outfit just above CSV, the CVS over there, called Level Up, and they're doing a bunch of software development for top secret clearance stuff, but the developers don't have top secret clearance. It's really weird how that works, because you'd figure they have to have top secret clearance, right? But what they get in are the requirements, and they have data that they don't understand in that scenario. So they go through the motions with data that they don't understand and can't contextualize for security purposes, which I think that's bananas personally. It's a way to get around that top secret clearance, so to find a larger pool of development talent. But context matters so much, right? Context is huge. So I'd say on the job, unless you're in some weird scenario like that, your context may come from non-obvious sources, like bringing donuts to the accounting department before you ask them a bunch of questions, or taking somebody from HR out to lunch to talk shop about, how to read some data. It might take a little bit of sleuthing, Kayla, is my answer to your question. And if you find yourself in a scenario where you don't have the column names, you don't have the context, we can still run through these processes and run stats tests, run visuals. But I think context is one of those pieces of magic that helps the human ingenuity, the human creativity understand more deeply. And generally at an established organization, there's other people that know so much more about how the data was collected. And they just assume that everybody else at the company knows, like, oh yeah, this column doesn't include tax. Well, it doesn't say that. But you might not have known that unless you had a little bit of water cooler talk, right? Or in a remote setting, actually just messaging people and saying, hey, do you have a couple minutes to talk about this? Did that speak to your question, Kayla, a little bit?
Yeah, that speaks to my question. I think that the thing that I'm the most concerned about is that I feel like for me, like I feel a lot, I don't like to form a hypothesis because I want to be very objective, because I think I don't want to put my preconceived notions on this feature is going to affect it more than this feature. I just want to run the test and see which one actually affects it more, and then do the hypothesis, or do 3 or 4 hypotheses. Like I would make, like, if I had 32 features, I feel like I would make 32 hypothesis and then null hypothesis. I don't know, that sounds weird, but I just don't want to, I don't know, how do you kind of like not bring that in, your preconceived, ideas about things?
Well, we're not robots, right? So we do have preconceived notions, and preconceived notions are a rich source of initial hypotheses, actually. And you are either confirming or denying those statistically. You're not just looking for what you want to find, right? But it's a good source of initial hypotheses. I think Greg had a comment, and I'll repeat it if y'all don't hear it.
I was going to say that one of the things that's kind of impressed upon us, like especially my background in psychology, is that it's very easy to kind of like have an opinion and like get invested. Like I'm running a study and I want this to be true. Like, oh, my thesis depends on this being true, right? But it's kind of like checking your emotions before. It's your question is not, am I right? The question is not in terms of like a value judgment about myself or a emotional investment I'm making. It's about, is this really a thing? What does that mean if it is? And what can I say? What does it say about the world if it's not a thing? That's better belief in itself. So it's kind of like checking. Hypothesis doesn't have to be an emotional investment. That's what we believe. What we think it can be based, but not making emotional investment. Ego in science can be deeply problematic.
Yeah. So I'm going to see if I can summarize that back verbally. So yeah, ego and science don't combine very, very well, but we are humans. We're not robots. And I'll read back some of the quotes. The hypothesis doesn't have to be an emotional investment. Generally, the stakeholders are very emotionally involved, and they will want you to investigate to support their their goals. Frank also said, you know, in his background in psychology, I think it's organizational psychology, right? It was impressed upon them not to ask the question, am I right? Because that question brings in your own bias. But asking the question or forming the hypothesis, is this a thing? How is X and Y, how are X and Y correlated? When we look at like the TIPS data set, I'm not crazy biased if I say, what is the relationship between tip and total bill or tip and table size? And now that's a small example because there's like 6 columns, right? This really brings up an important piece. And Kayla, I'm so glad you asked about this. I'm remembering a term right now. So exploratory data analysis is you're exploring is exploration. The opposite, and I think what Kayla, what you might be hinting at or getting at here is confirmation data analysis. Sometimes you may be asked just to confirm somebody's opinion. They don't want to hear anything else you want to say, but depending on what you find, you might have an obligation, a professional or moral obligation to say, hey, you asked me about A versus B, but what I found was C was so much more interesting and more statistically significant. Maybe the stakeholder says, yeah, we already knew that. Or they might say, oh, that's new. Yeah, Andrew, go ahead.
So I'm gonna say to you what I've understood. And that I've understood.
Yeah.
So my understanding of the machine learning previously is we just feed it all this data, it's gonna spit something out and tell us something.
Yeah.
But if we don't do EDA, we can throw in information that's trash and gonna make our model not work as well.
Yes.
So we have to find what is actually worth putting in that model.
Correct. I'm going to repeat that verbally for the folks on the call and the recording. Andrew shared and was seeking confirmation or refutation. ML, the model doesn't care what you feed it. So any fool can feed a model data. But what we're doing with exploratory data analysis, we're trying to figure out what data should we give to the model, right? Like, and it takes some human ingenuity here. So we're faulty because we have biases, but we're magic because we have ingenuity and creativity. So the model is not going to ask sanity checking questions. That's on us. And the sanity checking questions come in the exploration. Did that speak to your question? Okay. Yeah. Cool. This is a very rich discussion, and it speaks to the heart of why we do EDA. There's a trend I'm seeing because ML is so hot. It's such a buzzword. Folks jump into the ML before learning how to visualize things, before learning how to group by, before learning how to do a t-test, right? Before learning how to ask questions about the data. And then they get something back from a model and they're like, yo, I got this great model. How does it work? What's the most important feature? Of the 3 features going into the model, which if we only could pick one, which is the most important? So yeah, there's a lot of folks doing on planet Earth doing confirmation data analysis versus exploratory data analysis. For your own professional brand and for your own professional ethics, I would say stick to the exploratory data analysis. That doesn't mean skipping hypotheses, but yeah, I hope that helped. Another comment?
Yeah, I was gonna say about my corporate like it can be a large topic.
Yeah.
But as the person doing the research, your emotions should not.
Correct.
If you're doing the research in the 80s about whether or not Dungeons and Dragons is causing people to grow up violent, which was a thing.
It was a thing, big thing.
You can't be like a person, like like a certain research group looking for all the reasons the Dungeons and Dragons makes, children murder each other.
Yes.
You know,
Yeah.
That's not science.
Yeah, the example, in case y'all didn't hear, if you were doing an analysis in the 1980s, there was a theme going on. So Dungeons and Dragons, a role-playing game, started in the 70s. There was a book called Turmoil in the Toy Box, and a whole movement talking about how there was spiritual warfare being waged in Dungeons and Dragons. This board game was a mechanism for possession. Now, if that's really challenging because we can't really confirm or deny spirit possession or things in the occult, right? Stats in the occult don't really play ball together. But what Greg was talking about was if you only asked questions that would confirm your belief or your predisposition, and you conveniently avoided certain visualizations or topics, yeah, that's just totally cooking the books. Yeah. Yeah, Arsene. I thought I saw him.
Oh, yes, sorry. I was gonna, so there's this guy on YouTube. He has a channel called Veritas, I think is the name of the channel. And then he made an experiment where he told people, I'm gonna ask you to give me 3 numbers, and then I'm gonna tell you if the 3 numbers that you gave me follow the rules that I have in my head. And then people would give him 1, 2, 3. And no, the people would give him like 5, 10, 15. And he would say yes. So people would go 8, 16, 32, and it would say yes. And then he asks them, what is the rule? And then they would say the rule is multiply by 2. And then he would say, no, it's not the rule. So people did that all the time. And then they switched numbers in a way that it would increase them, but it would always increase them either by multiplying or by dividing or by adding a specific integer like +5. So it would be like 5, 6, 11. And he would say, yeah, that is part of the rule that I'm thinking about. And then people would say, oh, it's multiply or it's plus this amount. And then he would say, no, it's not. And at the end, he told them one couple found the answer. And then the answer was add the numbers in a way that they just increase. That was the rule. But how they found about the rule is by trying a question that did not answer the rule. So like instead of trying to confirm the rule, they tried to find an answer that completely destroyed the rule. And he said, that's our bias usually. So I think this helps us in modeling because like you said, we're always going to be biased in ways or another, but bias is not bad in itself. It's bad when we use it to do our biddings. So instead of like asking confirming questions, we can ask the opposite question and see how it goes. So I thought that video was really cool and applies to our example.
Yeah, skeptical empiricism, right? We want to start from a skeptical place and move forward empirically. Yeah, and that's the null. The null hypothesis is the, and we're looking for refutation. Yeah. Thank you for sharing that, Arsene. Something from Kayla, go ahead.
So just so I understand, exploratory data analysis is where you explore and then you do the ML model and then you get your results. And confirmation data analysis is where you just clean the data, run the ML model, get the features that are affecting the target variable the most, and then do the exploration. Is that the difference between the two?
I would say no. just throwing your data in a model is being sloppy and lazy. There's not a specific term for that. It's sloppy and lazy. It's not the end of the world if you're doing that with like image recognition, but you should also look at the images to make sure that you're not doing something stupid or illegal, right? Like the difference between confirmation data, confirmatory data analysis and exploratory data analysis is like, are you doing, did any of y'all remember seeing ads or hearing about 4 out of 5 doctors smoke Camel cigarettes? You know what they did with that study? If a doctor said, heck no, I don't smoke, they did not include that in the analysis. They didn't say 9 out of 10 doctors will say, I don't smoke and neither should you in the 50s. No, the folks who were doing these ads learned how to control people's emotions by propaganda in World War II, right? So they're using all these tips and tricks from propaganda to use things like 4 out of 5 doctors smoke Camel cigarettes. And they leave out the fact that most doctors are like, hell no, don't even touch that yourself. Get out of my office. That is confirmatory. That is charlatanism. And I would call that confirmatory data analysis. Kayla, does that help?
Yeah, I mean, I'm just thinking too, like I love medical shows and I love that type of stuff, but I'm not very well versed like with the project that was shown to us in class, and I wouldn't know if high blood pressure or, you know, white blood cells count or whatever would affect one, like you know what I mean, dying more than another. And so I don't know what statistics tests or what can you run early in this exploratory analysis if you have a difficult time like whittling down your features. I guess that's what I'm getting at. Like, what are the best things to use?
If you don't know the domain, fire up Wikipedia and start getting a summary understanding of the domain. I don't know anything about white blood cell count versus iron count or anything else. So I'm going to do a little bit of research. And if 15, 20 minutes on Wikipedia doesn't give me some clarity, I'm going to speak to the stakeholders in that project and say, hey, what is there some guidance on here? Or what should I know? Does that help a little bit?
Yeah.
Yeah, and if you're ever in a professional situation where somebody says, well, we only care about the doctors who responded that they smoked versus the doctors who say they don't smoke, get out of my office, then you know you're not in a place that's coming from skeptical empiricism, right? It's coming from, it's the difference between finding data to support your hypothesis versus finding a hypothesis that can't explain the data. That's a big difference. Yeah, does your data inform your hypothesis? I think that's good, right? Does your hypothesis, are you looking for a way to explain the data through 4 out of 5 doctors smoke Camels? Nah. It can be real easy to ignore stuff.
Doctors.
And what kind of doctors? Yeah, David brings this up. Yeah, are these mad doctors? You know, mad scientist doctors? Are they academics? Are they doctors on the payroll? Doctors of literature. Yeah. Okay, cool. Real quick, Adam, could I ask you to go downstairs and scoop up David and Yvonne? That would be really, really helpful. They're here a little early. Cool. This is an awesome discussion, and I'm so glad we're having it because the world is full of charlatans, and the world is full of 4 out of 5 doctors smoke Camels kind of crap, right? Yeah. Let's see, our guests should be arriving soon here. So I don't know that we're going to get into the code part before lunch, which is okay. It's totally okay. But I do get to introduce y'all to some pretty cool people here. So give that a couple of minutes. What's this documentation piece? I want to hit this again. I don't want to beat you over the head with it, but the difference between science and messing around is writing things down. Jen?
I've noticed just by looking at people's like repeat things, like just to kind of look at how people document their things.
Yeah.
It's not a lot. It's not as much as like, honestly, like I would put everything. That helps me to remember what I'm doing.
Yeah.
So would you say like with time, as you're like getting feeling more comfortable in this process, is the documentation less wordy or like, does that make sense?
No, I'd say the more you know your work, the more you should document. Yeah. I've seen a lot of notebooks on GitHub, just cruising people's analyses. And yeah, the more you know your stuff, document. And if you ever feel shaky about stuff, document. Hey, Yvonne. Hi, David. It's going great.
Hello.
Hello. How are y'all doing?
Yeah.
Cool.
In the middle of something.
We just kind of wrapped up we are introducing exploratory data analysis.
My favorite.
And say hi to our folks at home.
Hi.
Cool. So yeah, we're doing exploratory data analysis. We haven't gotten into any code, but we're talking about the difference between like confirming what you want to confirm versus finding what's there. I'm so glad to see y'all.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Weird being back.
It is, I bet. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wanna
Been out in the
introduce you?
wild for a while.
So Jemison, I want to introduce y'all to David Tenorio and Yvonne King. They are CodeUp alumni from, gosh, ages ago at this point, right?
We're the OGs.
Yeah, OGs.
Bays and Curry.
Bays and Curie, and they work just down the street here at Capture RX. So love to introduce y'all. Would y'all like to talk to the class?
Sure.
All right.
Go ahead.
I'm Yvonne King. I'm a data operations analyst over at Capture RX. And I also conducted I just recently did the tech interviews for 2 CodeUp students. So yeah, I can give you guys pointers on those questions that I asked.
Oh, let me get Zach
Chat.
over here too.
And so basically my day-to-day, hey Zach, my day-to-day is just, looking at data, finding anomalies and helping smooth out business processes and make sure everything is as optimized as possible. And then I also help out with data analysts and just like any ad hoc reports that they need or anything like that. And yeah, so that's me.
Yeah, kind of get up on it.
All right. Hi, everybody. My name is David Tenorio. I was part of Bays, which I think was the last cohort before the pandemic.
Yeah.
I've been at Capture RX for 2 years as a data analyst, and my day-to-day is essentially ad hoc reporting. So we get requests from our other coworkers, the client-facing coworkers, saying, "Hey, how come numbers are down for this client, or this data looks weird? What's going on?" Stuff like that. Also, do a lot of automating in Python. So basically, using libraries to run SQL queries through Python, FTP-lib to move data like to different FTPs, and basically try to just make processes more efficient. So we have more time to work on, more time to be proactive rather than reactive with some of the requests that we get.
Yeah. Cool. So y'all are doing some exploratory data analysis.
Yes.
Yes.
I do a lot of anomaly detection now, which wasn't my favorite when I was in class, but now I love it. And I found my little nook that I love. So it's fun being out in the wild. Getting that dirty data and just like trying to find a story and see what's happening. So it's a lot of fun. You guys are in for a treat. EDA is amazing.
Cool. Hey, Nathan.
Hi.
So let's see. For y'all's context, most of the folks in here and remotely are Jemison. So they just started the classification module. Nathan's over in Ennis, and they're doing MLP. They're getting close to
you
the
guys are
end.
close to done.
Yeah,
That finish line.
yeah.
Do you guys have any questions or anything?
So in your day-to-day, I guess, like, they talk about exploratory data analysis for 70% of the work.
actually pretty true. I do spend most of my time just in the data, trying to make sense of what I'm looking at or see if there is anything wrong with it, and things like that. So I don't really clean data. So for me, most of my day is spent just in the data, finding those trends and things like that. I would say that's pretty true.
Yeah.
And then 30%, you know, it's probably like 60% meetings and then 40% exploratory data analysis.
To have the meetings,
Yeah.
it is a lot of exploratory like data analysis. At Capture, we're not doing data science per se. Like we're not doing any machine learning or predictive learning, but we do a lot of EDA, a lot of data analysis.
Got a question from Ryan Miller remotely. How big is the team at Capture? How's it structured? And how specialized are folks on y'all's team?
That's a great question. Our company's about 200 people. About half of that's our IT team. And we did go through a recent restructure on our team. So we have, I would say, about 12 people on our team, half of them data analysts, half of them DOAs.
And then we have a couple of BAs as well.
What's a DOA?
Data operations analyst.
Data operations, okay.
So that's what I do, and it's kind of more optimizing. And so when there's a problem, so if like David finds an issue, like something looks a little off, he'll bring me in. I would look at the data, try to see where it originated and things like that, and then escalate it up to the business if it's, you know, like we call it like a red flag essentially. So if it's really broken, we can't work anymore, then we escalate it further, involve research teams and things like that.
Exactly. Yeah. So you can think of a DA, a data analyst, as me getting a request for a particular client, and then I'm saying, hey, this looks wrong. Odds are this isn't the only client that this is happening to. Let me escalate it to Yvonne, and she can look further into it and see if there's like a systematic approach that could be taken.
Yeah, and then we have some business analysts, and they do more of the business team, like the new enhancements. So if we want something like a new button on the website, they would find out why we need that, and they do like the mock. I don't really know what they do because I'm not a VA, but they do a lot of stuff. And then they create a lot of dashboards and things like that too. So they cater more to the business needs. And then they're kind of our in-between, like what might be in between for like the business and optimizing the company.
I think I saw a hand for Arsene. Arsene, do you want to pop in with your question?
I just typed it out.
Oh, okay, perfect. I'll relay that. This is our current subject. Have you found yourself in a situation where you were wanted or wished that the data had a certain story? And what did you concretely do to prevent yourself from giving into the temptation of making it fit your perspective?
I haven't really experienced that too much.
Lucky Doug.
Yeah, not yet, I should say, but, or maybe I just don't realize that I've done it. Could also be like, maybe I'm doing it, don't even know I'm doing it. But I don't think I've
Okay.
to my knowledge.
Yeah, I can't think of a specific example. I will say though, we do get requests where something's broken and we're trying to figure out why it's broken, and we may not be able to solve the root cause, but we put a little Band-Aid on it and then we continue investigating. So I think one of the characteristics that's really important is just to be patient with the data when you're working through it. Yeah.
Lincoln?
As a quick question, how in the industry, like you find yourself like kind of like feeling like an imposter bias, and how did you deal with it?
Oh, I have imposter syndrome like daily. Oh, a bias?
No, I'm not.
Imposter syndrome?
Yeah.
I feel imposter syndrome pretty much daily, but that's just like, if I don't find the problem.
And you've been doing this how long?
Yeah. So it's there every time. Like, you know, you always have that little voice, but at the end of the day, I'm like, oh no, I did all that I could. So and we're lucky we have a good team. And I came in and there was already CODA students there. So they were kind of like my crutch. Yeah, it worked out really nicely because I had that CODA like family there, so when I didn't know how to do something, I would just be like, hey, I don't know how to do this. But now I'm comfortable being like, I don't know what this is. I don't know how to do it. Who can help me? And that's what a team is for, because no one knows everything. And I Google daily. Like,
Can I quote you on that? That's what a team's for?
Yeah.
So parents is also in this with me, so we're rapidly approaching graduation. Can you talk a little bit about your transition from code up into the workforce? And like how that experience is like?
Sure. So for me, it was very unique in the sense that I ended right when the pandemic started. I think we graduated January 2020, and I had a job offer fall through. Like I went and met like the CTO, and they literally sent everyone home because of COVID, and then they froze all new hires. I actually was a TA for Code Up here for about 2 months for Curie. Yeah, I was a TA for Yvonne's class, and then just continue to code, continue to live in the data and put out applications every now and then. And then Steven Salas actually got me an interview at Capture RX. So I think it was probably about 4 months from graduation to full-time employment, but half of that being a TA for Code Up.
And my transition was pretty easy because I went in and I already had David and then Misty, who's going to be a teacher soon.
Yes.
So
Yes.
I had them both there for me, and then we also had a couple of BAs. We had Jeff as a BA, so I had a good network. So for me, it was really easy to transition into my new role in the field. And then we've kind of shaped the way that the department's been breaking up. We know Python, and before that, it was not a Python-based group. So it's fun to see how you can kind of help shape companies when you're there, just by finding what you're good at.
Yeah, what's great about Code Up is you get a little bit of everything, right? So no matter where you end up, you're going to be bringing something new to the table. More than likely, you're also going to be dealing with stuff that you're already kind of familiar with. And once you get out in the real world, you're going to think like right away, like, hey, this is like almost exactly like what I was doing in class. And then like all of those nerves or like any insecurities that you had about it, like they kind of, especially if you have a good team, and especially when you see other people also make mistakes. I'm not going to say if, because everyone you work with will make mistakes at certain times, and just having a good team and having the ability to be open and honest about things that you might mess up in and learn from it is really important.
Did you guys feel well prepared after Code Up?
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
They're like I said, they're not doing any data science. They're still not doing it, but our department had 2 people who knew Python, but they didn't even know pandas. So we were able to bring something new, and we were able to start improving processes immediately. Yeah, it's really cool.
What is something that when you started working, like you had to continue learning? I mean, obviously you're going to continue learning, but something that you really feel like I didn't know enough, or I needed to know more to do my job, basically. So like I think about
100% SQL.
Yeah.
Use SQL as much as you can.
Yeah.
Yes, SQL. When I first started, it was scary. And I still remember the class. I turned to Brian, who's also going to be a teacher here. And I was just like, what am I doing here? I don't understand what they're talking about. Like, I was like, I need to go home. This is not for me. And he's like, you got this, you got this. And now, I'm doing sub queries, case statements, all sorts of crazy stuff. I try to do as much in SQL before bringing it into Python so that I'm not bogging down the system, because I have to ping it anyway to bring it in. So try to do as much you can in SQL. Do yourself that favor.
Yeah, definitely. And stay patient. Like when we started, it was a lot of plugging and chugging. So running these really intimidating scripts that we don't need to know how they're working. We just need to know like the business purpose, what it's doing. And then as we continue to learn more about the industry and we continue to develop our skills, then we can start writing our own queries that
Yeah.
Kind of reverse engineer something.
And that's what I did a lot. I would take scripts that our lead wrote, and I would just break it down. Every day I would look at a piece of it, like what is this really doing? And then, so eventually, like I got to the point where I was taking what they wrote, pulled it into Python so I didn't have to copy paste anything. And then now we just click a button and then out pops out like a report for them. So you'll get to that point once you're out in the wild, just doing your day to day, and it'll start clicking kind of like code does in class. It'll all of a sudden just, oh, I know how to do this. I remember this.
Hey, Fred, I see you have your hand up. Do you have a question?
I do, Ryan. Thanks. And thanks to the team for coming in to talk to us. I really appreciate the discussion. I think we kind of touched on it, or somebody asked the question, but in a more broad sense, I guess, from the data analyst and then from the data operations analyst, what is the one or 2 top technical skills, and then 1 top soft skill that you're kind of leveraging every day in your work. So I heard SQL. Is there anything else you'd like to highlight or advise us to brush up on before we go out into the workforce?
Well, and then
Yeah, technical skills, definitely SQL. For us, it was Python and pandas. In terms of soft skills, I would say communication by
communication
far.
is key. That way you can communicate to the team. Like if you're not understanding something or if you need help, communicating with them is always the best option. So definitely communication.
Yeah, and then I guess another soft skill would be just be present, you know, the willingness to learn. Yeah.
Awesome. Could I ask a follow-up? How involved are you in kind of when you're sitting down with wherever you're getting the data from? Is it from that research team you talked about, or is it ever kind of a stakeholder conversation where they clarify the goals of what they want to do with that data?
So the data is like, we get the ad hoc reports from our internal customers. So, and they'll tell us what is needed. Sometimes they don't know what's needed, so we'll need to set up a meeting, kind of clarify before we go and pull any raw data or anything like that. So I would say for the most part, they're the ones that kind of dictate what we need to pull. So that's why it's really important to communication and then getting with them to fully understand what they need, because they don't always know what they want or need. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's the most important thing. One of the mottos of our team is the 5 whys, which, you know, just keep asking why over and over again until you get down to like the root cause, because you'll get a request that says, you know, hey, like I need this report, and that's it. And you're like, okay, well, why do you need this report? Like, what are you looking for? Does something look odd? Like, what are we actually trying? What's the question that you actually really want answered?
Yeah.
So we find ourselves occasionally pushing back on the stakeholders saying, hey, we want to get you an answer that ultimately is going to be what you're looking for, and it's not necessarily like what you're asking right now.
Okay, thanks a lot. I appreciate it.
Cool. I think we've got time for one more, if we've got one more.
Lazy. What's your favorite part about it?
My favorite part of what?
Your favorite part of your job? What do you love about it?
My team. I love my team. Yeah, it's a really good team. We're really close.
Yeah, oh, definitely. Like, yeah, I wouldn't still be there if I didn't love the team.
Yeah.
As far as like what I do day to day, it would be writing Python scripts. Like if I get trained on a new task, like I'm reading an SOP and it's telling me, okay, do step 1 through 15. In the back of my mind, I'm already thinking, how can I make this better? How can I make this more efficient? Yeah.
Anytime anyone asks me to do something like manual, I'm like, no, thank you. I'm gonna go ahead and write something. You know, I'll spend like 6 hours to do something that's like would have taken me like 5 minutes. But I was like, I don't have to do this ever again. So
it's really rewarding when you do something that's supposed to take an hour and you got it down to 5 minutes.
Yeah.
Really fun.
Cool. All right. Well, thank you so much for coming in and visiting with everybody. Awesome. Let's give them a hand for coming down. All right, nerds. Hope y'all enjoyed the conversation. Take a lunch break. We're going to go to lunch. We might be 5-10 minutes late coming back from lunch, but we'll get back into the code for EDA. Ciao. I think we're going to lunch, right? Oh, I was already recording the lesson, so that recorded y'all. Is that okay? Okay.